Hey guys, I was just recently asked a good question, which is what audiophile amplifier should I buy for my home stereo? Great question. And the answer is, I don't know, whatever works for you. Well, thanks for watching, and I hope you click the subscribe button and can catch me on another video. Oh, well, I probably should elaborate a little bit. Probably should go into this. I'll give you a little bit of my background. I started out as a would-be audiophile, and I enjoyed swapping out different pieces of gear and listening to the sonic improvements as I made those changes. And I had a good time with that, and I learned a lot in the process of building speakers and trying different amplifier designs and so forth. And each time I swapped out a piece of gear for something better, I could tell the difference. For a while. But after some time of doing this, I had put together a stereo system that was probably around $5,000 or so, and it was made of pretty good components. And I got to the point where I could swap out those components with other ones, which I felt were probably better. But honestly, I really couldn't hear the difference. So there's a point of diminishing returns. And in the audiophile community, it seemed to me that there was a lot of people who were into a little bit of mysticism. There was a lot of folks who believed that certain kinds of wires would make a difference in the sound quality that your speakers reproduce. Now, I certainly believe that bigger, thicker wires provide better damping factor to your speakers, and that does make a difference. And so speaker wires can make a difference to some extent. But some of these folks had some pretty far out ideas about just exactly what kind of materials should be used and how far apart those conductors should be spaced, and should the speaker wires be elevated off the floor for the best sound and this sort of stuff. And maybe some of those things do make a difference, but honestly, I couldn't hear it. I don't think it can be measured. And usually, if the differences can't be measured, they can't be heard. Now, I'll be the first to admit that there are certain types of distortion that us humans seem to be able to discern that our test equipment cannot. And we had a real issue with this back in the early days with transient intermod distortion, where we would have circuitry that would measure really good, but it didn't sound that good. It didn't last the test of time in listening tests. And so I'll be the first to admit that there are some things that we can discern with our human senses that aren't so accurately reflected in the specifications and the measurements. But that being said, I found that the audiophile community oftentimes slid into the realms of religion and mysticism, and they would convince themselves that one thing sounded better than another when I wasn't really so sure if most of those folks, if put into a true A-B comparison that was scientifically done, could actually identify one piece of gear over another consistently. So, having said that, my audiophile days, well, they continue on to today, but I'm somewhat of a scientific audiophile, which is, if you can't measure the results, I'm a little bit skeptical. And this led me more and more down the path of pro audio, pro sound, which were the folks who were involved in doing concert production and, live sound situations. And these folks who are the professionals in this field tend to be a pretty scientific bunch. There isn't a whole lot of mysticism about what sounds better than another thing. Although there is a contingent of folks who have kind of a bug about particular mic preamps. But, so having said that, the question comes up, what amplifier should I use for my home hi-fi? And my experience with amplifiers is primarily with the live sound industry and power amplifiers that are used for that application. And I think that the power amplifiers, especially today's, that are used for live sound and pro sound applications are as good as any. I think that companies like Crown and QSC and Yamaha and so forth have really good engineering staffs who know how to design amplifiers, who know how to build equipment that is rugged, reliable, and that works really well. Some folks would say that there are audiophile brands of amplifiers which are better sounding than those, and I personally tend to question that because all of these companies are using essentially the same components inside of their amplifiers. All of these engineers who are designing amplifiers know how to design good, low distortion, reliable amplifiers. Now, maybe 40 years ago, that science wasn't quite so well proven, but today, it's not that difficult using our known methods to build high-quality amplifiers. So, what amplifier should you use for your home? Well, in my mind, I would lean toward the pro sound field of amplifiers because I think that they're just the best value. I know there are amplifiers out there in the market like Van Alstyne and other audiophile brands that are tremendously expensive, and I'm sure that they are excellent products. But in a blind A/B listening test, are you really going to hear the difference between amplifiers that are categorized as audiophile amplifiers versus commercial pro sound amplifiers? Generally, I would say I doubt it. Now, when looking at pro sound amplifiers, I would choose one that is not a digital amplifier. I would look for a traditional class A/B amplifier. The digital amplifiers have to convert that digital signal into an analog signal that drives the loudspeakers. And those conversion circuits tend to be a little bit load dependent. That is, the performance of the amplifier will change slightly depending upon what the load on the amplifier at that point is. And speakers are very dynamic, varying loads. And so that can cause some shifts in the performance of the amplifier a little teeny bit, depending upon what kind of speaker system you attach to it. Now, in the world of pro sound, arena sound, I have no problems with the digital amplifiers. Generally, I would say that they sound great. They're lightweight, they're power efficient, and they're reliable. And so there's a lot of pluses in the live sound industry or the band sound industry for using digital amplifiers. And I do think they sound good. But if I'm going for the ultimate sound quality, I'm going to choose an old school class AB amplifier, big, heavy, old amplifier. And then the other question is, if I'm going to be using this for home use, I don't want an amplifier that's going to make a lot of noise mechanically. If it's for a band or an arena sound system, I don't care too much about fan noise. But in my home theater, I don't want to hear a bunch of fans whirling on. And most amplifiers tend to have fans to keep them cool. And so I look for a model that doesn't have that. And there's a lot of good choices out there. I can only relate my own personal experience as to what amplifier I would choose out of my collection of amplifiers for home hi-fi use. And the one that I would probably reach toward is a Yamaha P series, P5000, for example, a P5000S. They have a slightly smaller one, which is a P3500S. The bigger versions of that line have a little more fan, and a P5000 is already at 500 watts per channel, so I think in my applications that would be more than enough for my home stereo. So I probably wouldn't be reaching for a P7000S. Now, I know that that is now a discontinued line, and they have new lines that have superseded that, which I think are pretty similar to those. The Yamaha amplifiers, they do have fans, but they run extraordinarily quiet, and I don't think you'll hear them in most situations. And I find that the Yamaha amplifiers are extremely quiet electrically as well. I don't hear any hum, buzz, or noise, and I think they sound terrific. What amplifier do I have on my personal hi-fi system? Well, here in my office, I'm using an old Crown PS200. And the reason I choose the PS200 is because, well, it's got a reputation for sounding great. It is an interesting amplifier in that at low power levels, it runs pure Class A, meaning that there's no amplifier switching at all. And then as the power level increases and you put more demand on the amplifier, then it slides into a Class AB mode, which theoretically would have slightly more distortion. But the old PS series amplifiers, the PS200, the PS400, are often regarded as some of Crown's best-sounding amplifiers. And they have no fan. They're completely passive cooling. PS200 is 100 watts per channel, and for me and my casual listening, that's just fine. If you need a little more power than that, you can step up to a PS400. And that's a pretty old amplifier, but I think they work great. I'm sure there's lots of other good choices in the market, but that's what I would look for, is a pro sound amplifier by a major manufacturer that is either completely passively cooled, so in that case you'll probably be limited somewhat in the power level, or has fans that are very quiet. One of the things that I see often discussed in forums is the use of Behringer iNuke amplifiers and replacing the fans in them with another computer-style fan that's quieter than the ones that are provided with the amplifier. And lots of people like that choice. I personally would probably not go that direction because those are digital amplifiers, Class D. Like I mentioned, I have no problem using those amplifiers for band situations. I've had plenty of good experiences with them. But in my home hi-fi, I'd stick with a Class AB amplifier. So if you're looking for a recommendation, the one that comes right off the top of my head is the Yamaha series amplifiers. I think Yamaha makes a terrific product. But I think that you'll also have good luck with a lot of pro sound, higher tier Class AB amplifiers. And they're a lot less expensive than the audiophile type amplifiers. You may have some issues with connectors to be aware of. Pro sound amplifiers are probably going to be expecting a balanced input as opposed to an unbalanced input. So you may need to get a converter box to go from RCA unbalanced minus 10 dB audio level to a balanced 0 dB line level that is used in professional audio equipment, but that's fairly inexpensive. And the speaker connectors may be speak-ons rather than banana connectors or connectors you can easily just attach wires to the amplifier. But you can purchase a couple of speak-on plug connectors for your speakers. That's pretty easy. So you might have some minor interface issues connecting a pro sound amplifier to your home hi-fi system, but nothing that should be terribly insurmountable. And the cost of those components with a pro sound amplifier is most likely going to be still a lot less than looking at some of the audiophile type power amplifiers. So that's my opinion. And I'm sure that there are those who will disagree, and that's fine. That's your opinion. But this has been my experience with my ears. I think I've got a pretty good set of ears, but I'll also readily admit that there are folks out there who can probably hear things that I cannot. So that's my opinion on what amplifier you should get for your home hi-fi system. I think you should get one that you like. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you choose to subscribe. And I hope to see you again on another episode of Sound Advice.